Yes.
Okay. Bangalore-based historian Dr. Vikram Sampat is the author of 8 acclaimed books: Splendors of the Royal Mysore, The Untold Story of the Wadiyas, My Name is Gawar Jan, sorry, The Life and the Times of a Musician, The Voice of the Veena as Bhalchandar, a biography, Woman of the Records, Indian Classical Music and the Gramophone, 1900 to 1930, and his latest book, The Bravehearts of Bharat. His two-volume biography, Savarkar, Echoes from the Forgotten Past, and Savarkar, A Contested Legacy, went on to become the national bestseller and were acclaimed by the Prime Minister Sri Narendra Modi. He spoke to Dr. Vikram on Savarkar earlier. Dr. Sampat was recently confirmed with the honor of being elected as the Fellow of the UK prestigious Royal Historical Society. He was awarded the Sahitya Academy's first Yuva Puraskar in English Literature and the ARSC International Award for the Excellence in Historical Research in New York for his book on Kauha Jan. The book has been adapted in the theatre as a play, Kauhar by Lillet Dubey, and is being adapted to a Bollywood film by Asutosh Gowarikar. Dr. Sampat was among the 4 writers and artists to be selected as the writer in residence at the Rashtrapati Bhavan in 2015. He has a doctorate in history and music from the University of Queensland, Australia, and was a senior research fellow at the Nehru Memorial Museum and the Library, New Delhi. He is also an Aspen Global Leadership Fellow and an Eisenhower Global Fellow 2021, an engineer, mathematician from BITS Pilani, and an MBA in finance from SP Jain, Mumbai. Dr. Sampath is also a trained Carnatic vocalist. He has established the Archive of Indian Music, India's first digital sound archive and vintage recordings. He is the founder director of Bangalore Literature Festival, Indic through Festival, Earth, a Cultural Fest. Friends are present. Dr. Vikram Sampat.
Yeah, Vikram, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Very good morning to everyone. It's always a pleasure talking to all of you. And I remember our earlier interaction as well. And in just a span of another year, I'm back again, and this time with a new book. And this is the book Bravehearts of Bharat, Vignettes from Indian History. And I'll probably, give a brief talk about the book, its premise, the various characters that I've tried to feature in it, and why something like this is important, and probably open it up more for questions and interactions from all of you, which would probably make more sense than my monologue. The premise for this book, quite interestingly, came from a conversation I had with my very dear friend and eminent economist Sanjeev Sanyal a couple of years ago in Delhi. And casually, while chatting, and both of us, he's a history buff, I'm a historian, and so we keep talking on our common subjects of interest of history. And he brought this fact to my attention that, have you ever noticed that, in our growing up years, and I'm sure all of you would also have a similar experience, that in our growing up years, in our history textbooks, all the battles that we have been spoken about or taught about, that's been dinned into our heads, are invariably the battles where India or Indians have lost. Right from the the mythical Aryan invasion theory to the Arab invasion of Sindh, down to every battle. You name any child who's asked to name 5 or 6 battles: the Battle of Tarain, the Battle of Haldi Ghati, the Battle of the battles of Panipat, the Battle of Buxar, Battle of Plassey, Anglo-Mysore Wars, Anglo-Maratha War, Anglo-Sikh War, down to the establishment of the British Raj. We've only been taught stories of our failure, of losses as a nation, as a civilization. And, if we are around today as a civilization, while most of our contemporaries have gone into oblivion, there must have been some battles that we won too. There must have been some resistance that we put as well. And, but if that is the case, then where are these stories of courage? Where are these stories
Yes,
of
Mr.
valor
Krish.
and resistance? And, both of us kept asking each other that I can hear some. Okay. Can we name 10 battles or, 10 heroes?
What you are going to work on?
Murtaza,
Your head is that.
I can hear
Sorry,
you talk.
sorry.
Yeah. So if there are 10 battles that we have won also, and the names of a few heroes who led these valiant attacks, and we really were at a loss of words to think, which were these. And so that is where this thought of this book germinated in my mind. And it stayed with me for a long time, thinking, which are these instances? Then in the course of, a lot of introspection, a lot of thought, and my own evolution, I also saw some of the, big faults that exist in the Indian historiography, in the way the history of India has been written. It's a highly, as you would all probably empathize and agree with me, it's a highly Delhi-centric narrative that we are fed of Indian history. Almost everything about India, even the media narratives or whatever, is so concentrated around the persona and the life and activity of Delhi. And I have nothing against the city; it's a beautiful city. But then, nonetheless, there is vast swathes of land in this nation somehow get ignored because of this. There can be floods in the northeast, like it happened recently in Assam and so on, and that doesn't capture national imagination as much as, say, some little scuffle in some JNU or somewhere which is in Delhi, which is almost blown up to mean that this is the story or the narrative of India. And similar thing, the tyranny of distance, as they say, things which are far away from the so-called center of epicenter of this country's political activity somehow don't capture national imagination. And we see the same kind of thing even in the historical writing. If I draw your attention to some of the NCERT books that are currently there on history, it's actually all available online on the NCERT website, class 6, 7, 8. One can just download it and have a look yourself. The incommensurate kind of attention and importance that is given to even small dynasties which ruled Delhi vis-a-vis large parts of the land. The south of India doesn't get featured in the way it deserves to. The northeast of India is a black hole about which most of the people don't even know what is the history of the northeast. The Ahoms of Assam, they ruled for 600 long years in Assam, but so little is known to mainstream mainland India, as if Assam is not a part of that mainland, where we don't know anything. If we ask, can you name 2 Ahom rulers? I don't think any one of us would be able to, whereas they ruled this country for 600 years. But can you name all the Khiljis and the Tughlaqs and the Lodhis and all these people who probably ruled for 50, 60 years with zero contribution to this country or its culture or civilization, and they were invaders and marauders? A child would be very dutifully asked to memorize by rote, all these succession lines. The Cholas ruled for 1,000 years, and their coverage in the NCERT books is abysmal. You have a couple of lines there. The Vijayanagar Empire probably gets half a paragraph. The Marathas, from whom the British finally took India, they hardly get a mention. If you will be shocked to know that Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj's coverage in today's NCERT books is only a photograph. A photograph with a caption under it. So that is all that a young child growing up in India and who's learning under the CBSE or the NCERT, which is the bigger one, the syllabus, would know about heroes like this. So, the Rashtrakutas, the Pallavas, the Shatavahanas, the Chalukyas, all these different dynasties from southern India, the Meitei rulers of Manipur, as I said, the Marathas, even the Rajputs. I mean, they don't get the kind of coverage that is, including the Deccan Sultanates, all the 5 Sultanates, Ahmednagar, Bijapur, and Golconda, and all of these places, they don't get the kind of importance that somewhere Delhi and even little incidents around it get. So that was another thing which was, brewing in my mind. The third aspect, which I found very problematic, was that in this entire narrative of history, where his story becomes so important and her story never gets the importance that is due. Women and women rulers particularly do not get commensurate importance, and that's a probably a the curse of patriarchy that we've always had, where the stories and narratives of strong women who were part of the who are helming various things don't get the importance. So there was all this going on in my head, and I thought, okay, let's try to address some of these issues through a book. And that's how this book Bravehearts of Bharat came around, in which I have tried to chronicle 15 civilizational heroes and heroines, as I call them, who come from different parts of India. There's Lalitaditya Muktapida of Kashmir. I don't know how many of you had heard of Lalitaditya of Kashmir. I really do not know, but Rani Naiki Devi of Gujarat. And I'll briefly, in my intervention, talk about some of these Bravehearts. Rani Naiki Devi of Gujarat, then Rana Kumbha of Mewar, Rudrama Devi of Warangal, Rajaraja Chola and Rajendra Chola from the south, Rani Abbakka from my hometown of Karnataka, Marthanda Verma from Travancore, Velu Nachiyar from Tamil Nadu, Lachit Borphukon from Assam, the Ahom general, just last week, quite coincidentally, we celebrated the 400th birth anniversary of Lachit Borphukon, which was done in a very big manner by the governments of both India and Assam in the heart of Lutyens, Delhi, by literally Halla Bol. There were billboards all over the city with Lachit, staring in your face. And I think that was one way that a lot of India woke up to this much forgotten hero. Banda Singh Bahadur from Punjab, Chand Bibi of Ahmednagar, Rajarshi Bhagyachandra Jai Singh, again a very less known stalwart from Manipur, the ruler of Manipur, who actually established the entire Vaishnav tradition there that you see today. Begum Hazrat Mahal from Lucknow, who was one of the main protagonists of the 1857 uprising. So these are some of the 15 names that I thought of choosing for this. Of course, it was a very tough choice, whom to choose. Rather, it was more of whom to leave, because there were so many more people who were part of this grand Indian narrative who were not part of our regular mind recall. The criteria was that they all needed to be, tales of courage, tales of resistance, tales of valor, who had won, wars, and I'll talk about it briefly in the next few minutes. And also they had to come from different parts of India. Traditionally, those regions which are largely ignored in the larger historiography of India, and an equal balancing of men and women. So I very consciously tried to ensure that 7 out of these 15 were women. And it was so hard, so difficult to find material about them, because even their contemporary chroniclers had ignored them, as I shall illustrate very shortly. So this was how this came. And I think, as that famous African proverb goes, that till the lions find their own storytellers, the history of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. So I think it is time that, now with this new wave of what we're calling as decolonization and looking at our own past through a different lens, through a scholarly lens, because I'm very conscious of the fact that there's a very thin line between this and slippery slope of jingoism and that kind of, rabble rousing, which can also happen. And history is a tool for both. It can be a tool for genuine pride in your past, your ancestors, their achievements. It can also be used to whip up passions and emotions in a very, very, jingoistic manner. So keeping all that apart, and the genuine sense of pride and ownership that we can have about our past and its achievements, I think that's a very important utility of history, because history is eventually the tool or the mirror in which I think we identify ourselves as a nation, as a people, as a civilization, and it gives that sense of self-worth to all of us. So the book spans a wide time range. I start with the 7th century with Lalitaditya of Kashmir and ends in 1857 with Begum Hazrat Mahal of Awadh or Lucknow. And the period after 1857 is generally categorized as the freedom movement. And so I thought that's a different treatment that, historically one needs to give to it. So in this large, about 1,000-year span, tried to fit all these 15 characters. And somehow they just kept falling in line as to how these chronologically they all come together. And I began with very consciously with Kashmir and with Lalitaditya. Now, Lalitaditya was a ruler of the Karkota dynasty of Kashmir. Again, probably very few people would know about this dynasty itself, which was one of the most powerful ones in Kashmir in the 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th centuries. And he was counted as a, Alexander of India and the second Samudragupta, as many chroniclers called him. And Kalhana in his Raja Tarangini gives a very, very detailed account of the history of Kashmir itself, and particularly of Lalitaditya. He's supposed to have gone on this large Digvijaya campaign, which conquered most of, the Indian subcontinent. And Kashmir was not just limited to today's state of Jammu and Kashmir, but a significant portion of today's Indian subcontinent itself, going all the way up to today's Bengal and Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, even Gujarat, parts of Punjab, Uttar Pradesh, Kannauj, and the Indo-Gangetic plains. All these were part of the Kashmir Empire. And also on the west, it extended all the way up to Afghanistan, Gilgit-Baltistan, of course, Pakistan, and that whole region. And what was significant was when the Arab invasion happened, in 712 CE with Muhammad bin Qasim, it took the Arabs about 60 years to even conquer Sindh. And it was with a lot of difficulty that they finally defeated and killed Raja Dahar of Sindh and took over Sindh. But beyond that narrow stretch of Sindh and a few seaports that were occupied there, the Arabs never managed to make an incursion into the rest of India. And that was because, and that is a story we have never told, that time and again, Indian kings actually formed large confederacies to ensure that the Arabs were pushed out. And Lalitaditya was one of them. He joined hands with one of his arch rivals, Yashovarman of Kannauj, and they formed one major alliance which pushed the Arabs out of the northern belt. Similarly, in the rest of India, you had people like Nagabhatta, Vikramaditya, the Chalukya emperor, Pulakeshin and Danti Durga, the Rashtrakuta king. They formed a big alliance from central, southern, and western India, and they pushed the Arabs back. Now, it must be kept in mind that, while, within less than, a few decades after the death of the Prophet, the forces of the Caliph had somehow managed to occupy large parts of Central Asia, Northern Africa, and the Islamic empire that was being built there extended right from the shores of the Atlantic on the west to almost touching the gates of India on the east. But mind you, while all those places actually capitulated to the might of the Caliph's swords and the invading armies from there, it took forces from Central Asia 500 years to actually establish the first Islamic Sultanate in India in 1206. So between 700 to 1206, over these 500 years, you had so many waves of invasions. First from the Arabs, which, as I mentioned, was repelled by all these rulers. Then, of course, from the 11th century, you had the Turkic invasions from Ghazni and Ghori and so on. But each time these people came, unlike what is the common imagination that we were just sitting as sitting ducks, waiting for invaders to come in, and we were cowering in front of all of them, and we were disunited. Our society was crumbling. We were an abysmal society. Unlike all of these common myths that are perpetuated almost axiomatically, the truth was quite different, as I was to discover as well. Some of the Arab, chroniclers, cartographers, in their own accounts, they had written that the land of India was, the society was something which was so steeped in justice and moral values. They had a high quotient of virtuosity and all of that. So we don't know whether invasions happened because our society was decadent, or the society started decaying because of the invasions, which with cause and effect, which is all that history is all about. So that is something that also comes through from the eyes of the invaders themselves. So this was Lalitaditya who managed to do this, and he also established Kashmir as a center of excellence, as a center of knowledge and learning. Another very important aspect of the Indic imagination of what a big empire is, it was not just establishing vast empire and magnificent palaces, temples, which was of course there, but also the index of your kingdom's greatness was measured by intellectually and scholastically how sound were you, and how much were you better off than a competitive kingdom. And so even Lalitaditya, every time he went and occupied any place, when he defeated Yashovarman, all the great poets and scholars from their court were brought back to Kashmir. People like Bhavabhuti, Atrigupta, and Vakpati, and all these great scholars were given patronage in the Kashmir court. And Atrigupta was the grandfather of Abhinav Gupta, who later found the Kashmir Shaivism, school of Kashmir Shaivism. And Kashmir thereafter became this very important center of, of learning, of philosophy, Tantra, all the Vigyan, Bhairav Tantra, and the, Shakta school that it started flourishing there, Buddhism and Vajrayana Buddhism, which also began to influence Tibet, which was in the neighborhood, and Tibetan Buddhism. You have all the Avalokiteshvara and goddess Tara and so on, which were directly, very much influenced by Shaivite, iconography and symbols. So all of this give and take was happening there. Charvaka and Sushruta, the Ayurveda specialists, were all stationed in Kashmir. And, whether it's astronomy, astrology, Sanskrit, poetry, philosophy, all of this, Kashmir became such an important center. And no wonder then that, when Adi Shankaracharya established the 4 mutts in different parts of India, Sringeri in the south, Puri in the east, Badrinath in the north, and Dwarka in the west. The final peeth that he established was at Kashmir, which was called the Sarvagnya Peeth, the all-knowing peeth. So, and goddess Sharda, the goddess of learning, was its presiding deity, and the script there was also called Sharda. So, the importance of Kashmir as a civilizational, icon of this subcontinent was, I think, stamped by rulers like him, and, with the help of so many scholars and others. And that's also one reason why Kashmir has been constantly under attack, because the best way to make a civilization bend is by destroying its knowledge centers and its centers of learning. So this was one of the characters briefly that I spoke about, who is covered in the book. I then move on to, South India, where, as I said, the Cholas, Rajaraja and Rajendra, they probably heralded a great renaissance in the Chola Empire itself, which, as I said, had ruled for almost 1,000 years. But the primacy was established by this father and son duo, where the Chola, empire went beyond the confines of what is today India. So under Rajaraja, Maldives and Sri Lanka came under Chola influence. And under Rajendra in 1025 CE, there was a huge campaign that was led against Sri Vijaya, which is in the Malay Peninsula, where 14 major ports of Sri Vijaya were attacked by a large Chola fleet. They were one of the earliest naval armadas that India had. And it was very interesting and for me to discover in my research as to how would these people have actually managed and done that. Sitting in from the port of Nagapattinam in coastal Tamil Nadu to go all the way to Southeast Asia at a time when they did not have, mariners' compasses or, navigation instruments. They had perfected the astronomy and the movement of stars, the direction of winds, and all of that. In fact, at this time of the year, when it's Margashirsha Mass, month of Margashirsha, at that time when there is a nakshatra of either Mrigashira or Ardra that comes up in the sky, the wind speed is going to be a particular speed and direction. And at that particular point of time, if you start from the port of Nagapattinam, you're going to go directly and hit Srivijaya. And so they had all these kinds of different technology and techniques through which they went and made this huge attack on this Srivijaya, captured it. And interestingly, around that time, we're talking about the 11th century, the Cholas were one of the major trading powers in the Indian Ocean and the Southeast Asia region, along with the Fatimids in Egypt and the Song dynasty of China. So constantly you see India's primacy in this entire Asian region, along with China, be it the Tang dynasty or the Song dynasty, and subsequent ones as well. And Cholas were this major power. What is interesting in the Chola story is that, while they occupied all these places, we did not go and colonize all these lands. We could have done exactly what the Europeans did, go and set up colonies there. But all that the Cholas also did was, whether it was Sri Lanka, they actually destroyed the capital of Anuradhapura and established a new center there. They would go and just establish the usual, Shiva temple with that long spire like the Brihadishvara temple that you have in Tanjavur, and then go away and leave someone as a local guy as a tributary or a vassal, and never a Chola person coming and sitting there and a governor. Even the Arabs at that time were having governors sent all the way by the caliph, whereas we didn't do that. What the Cholas actually negotiated for was more of trade, more of merchant passes for the Tamil merchants to go all over Southeast Asia. So there was a lot of to and fro of people, a lot of trade contacts, a lot of osmosis of cultures. And that is also one reason why, even to this day, Southeast Asia has such a deep imprint of Indian, Hindu, and Tamil, cultures, which is imprinted so deeply in all those regions that we see. So that is another important aspect, I think, of the Indic imagination of what conquest means. That how are you going to expand your reach, not necessarily through violence, through occupation and all of that, but more through culture, through trade, through leaving a civilizational, impact on all these other regions. A little about some of the other, people that I cover. Rani Naiki Devi of Gujarat, again, a fascinating lady of the Chalukya, Solanki dynasty of Gujarat. And in 1178, when Muhammad Ghori invades India, he was defeated by Rani Naiki Devi, and we would probably never know about this woman or her heroics. There was this battle of Kasarhada, which was fought in 1178, where Ghori, who thought, a woman is there at the helm, the king had died, and she, the son was an infant, Mool Raja II, and so she was, the mother was the regent queen. And so Ghori thought Gujarat is a low-hanging fruit. It's going to be easily occupied. And so he made this attack. But little did he realize that the shock that he was in for, where Rani Naiki Devi, she sent out, emissaries to all the kings of the vicinity, including Prithviraj Chauhan, who was her contemporary, saying, let's all join hands. Let's form this huge alliance of, Western, North Indian, kings to push this fellow out for good. But a lot of them did not join her, including Prithviraj Chauhan, who was quite suspicious of the Chalukyas. But with a few local chieftains and this and that, she actually was, though numerically and militarily a lesser, army, she managed to pull the enemy down to her, position of advantage and defeated him completely. And he was so devastated and humiliated that a woman had, defeated him. And even his own Persian chroniclers, they talk about what a shame, our Hammira was defeated by a lady and all of that. So and he never turned towards Gujarat ever again. And this was a very turning point in the history of India, because had Ghori managed to occupy Gujarat at that time, the whole of Gujarat, Rajputana, that entire region would have fallen into Ghori's hands, and that would have had a different, course for Indian history. But despite, this important role that Nike Devi played, there's hardly anything that is known about this brave woman. We just have, brief sketches about who she was. She was a princess from Goa, the Kadamba Goa princess, who was married into the Chalukya dynasty. But sadly, what was disturbing even for me to read, that even in her contemporary chroniclers, there are in Sanskrit and Prakrit and so on, in the Jain scholars of Gujarat who wrote about her, they almost say that the opponent was so weak that even a woman could vanquish him, almost making it sound that her valor, her strategy, her intelligence did not matter. If the opponent was strong, she would have been defeated. So even our own Indian chroniclers, and that's the issue I flagged off at the beginning of how we've been very unfair to her stories in this larger narrative of history. So Nike Devi was one of them. Another lady, again from the south of India, was Rani Rudramma Devi of Warangal. In the chronology, she comes around the same time, around the 12th, 13th centuries, from the Kakatiya dynasty there. And again, a very fascinating lady. Her father, Ganpati Deva, he did not have any sons. And so he grooms his daughter to be his successor. And the gender of the kid is concealed from the rest of the family and the rest of the nobility. It's almost told that I have a son. And of course, till she comes of age, after that, he obviously cannot conceal the gender any longer. But till that time, she's trained in incognito to be a great warrior. And then when she comes back, both of them ascend the throne together. Father and daughter rule the kingdom together for a period of time. And then once he dies, she takes over. And since the day she takes over, there are rebellions within the family, within the neighborhood, all the other kingdoms, because again, a woman is par for the course, so it's easy to take away this kingdom. But little did they know that Rudramma was going to give them a tough fight all through. So including the Warangal fort that she got constructed, which became an invincible fort. She devised new administrative mechanisms, what was called as the Nayan Karamu system, of having tributaries who are loyal to the king, to the queen rather, to the sovereign, and then they were rewarded rather than hereditary, nobility who was ruling Warangal till then. And that later slowly graduated into the Nayaka system, which even the Vijayanagar Empire, adopted, with the Nayaks of Tanjore, Madurai, and Keladi, and all these places that came about. So that had its origins in the, innovation, so to say, of Rudramma. And it was very interesting to see that, till her last breath, she had to fight rebellions, she had to fight insurgents within and outside the kingdom. And she died at the age of 80 in battlefield fighting. So at the age of 82, she was actually leading an army to, quell all the rebellions that were going on against her. So again, a very, very fascinating woman about whom we know so little about. Another person from the west of India was Rana Kumbha of Mewar. Interestingly, a man who is supposed to have been unvanquished all his life. Not a single battle that he ever lost. And he established the Kumbhalgarh fort, named after him, which is the longest fort wall in India, and the second largest after the Great Wall of China, a UNESCO monument. And like he was invincible, the Kumbhalgarh fort also remained, by and large, barring small instances when invaders took over. The fort was a major center of power for Mewar and for keeping invaders out. And I think Rana Kumbha instilled that entire spirit of, this valor and chivalry among the Rajputs, which continued for several centuries thereafter. Quite sadly, a man who was so invincible, he actually met his end in a very tragic manner, where his own son, there was a dispute of succession between his sons. So while he was sitting in a temple meditating, the temple that he had built, where he was meditating and praying to the god, that time his son comes and stabs him in the back and kills him. So he met his end that way, but all his life, this was a man who remained unconquered. But Rana Kumbha is probably seldom known or heard of in the larger story of the great heroes of India. Moving to the next period of time, moving steadily ahead in time. Now we're moving to the 16th century. While by then the Europeans have come in as traders and occupied all the ports and the trade in different parts of India. And some of the main characters who play an important role then. One was Rani Abbakka from this small little place called Ullal near Mangalore in Karnataka. She ensured, actually there were 4 Abbakkas, and all the 4 Abbakkas were doggedly against Portuguese incursions into trade and territory of their empire. And Rani Abbakka ensured that the Portuguese were completely defeated, and she had a small little fleet. It was not even a great army that she had as compared to the Portuguese, but it was she ensured that the Portuguese were somehow driven out. Very innovative ways, in coconuts, coconut hollows were made, and in that ammunition was filled in, and in the middle of the night her entire small little army of amateur swordsmen and that they would light these coconuts and throw these as missiles, and all these missiles went, and the whole Portuguese fleet is supposed to have caught fire and got destroyed, and most of them were killed or they had to retreat. And so the Portuguese really never managed to occupy Ullal. Their sphere of control was limited to Goa, which is where they established themselves. Interestingly, though, Abbakka is so little known about her in the larger imagination of India or its history, in coastal Karnataka, she's still a very important element of folk life, of rituals. You all must have seen the Kantara film that recently came of Bhuta Aradhana, or where you go on this. It's a kind of a folk art form where you invoke spirits, you invoke ancestors, you invoke gods and deities and all of that. In many of those, and I had the fortune of actually seeing one of those in coastal Karnataka, where in the Bhuta Aradhana, Abbakka is invoked, and the practitioner, has Abbakka on him, apparently, and narrates her own tale. So while our mainstream history and historians may have forgotten her, in local folklore, in local tale, she's very much alive. Of course, for a modern historian, how much of that to take as a source of history is the challenge. A lot of triangulation with documented facts and what the Bhuta is actually telling you about herself is something that is a conundrum that one needs to face. Now, neighboring Kerala, from Karnataka, once one moves to Kerala, we had this amazing ruler called Martanda Varma, who established the empire of Travancore. And in the 18th century, the Dutch East India Company by then had emerged as one of the most important trading companies. It was the first to be listed on global stock exchanges. They had a sphere of access which moved from South Africa, moving all the way to Asia, going to India, and then also Southeast Asia, going up to Japan and Maldives and so on. And large parts of India, whether it was Kerala, Bengal, Gujarat, all these places were important centers of the Dutch. But the Dutch were constantly trying to occupy the smaller kingdoms, particularly in Kerala, driven by the lure of the pepper trade and the spice trade that was happening from there. And here Martanda Varma becomes this bulwark against this expansionism and colonial overtures of the Dutch. the Dutch governor actually comes to his court and very haughtily tells him that, I plan to invade your kingdom. And Martanda Verma haughtily, replies saying, I am also planning to invade Europe, and I'm just waiting for, for some of my fishermen to stitch their boat so that we could go all the way and invade your, your territories. And the guy doesn't know what to reply. And this was not just bravado, he followed it up with action, where what is known as the Battle of Kolachal in 1741. This ensured a complete rout of the Dutch East India Company. So much so that they collapsed, in several ways as a global power too. Their trade in India suffered terribly thereafter, and all their dreams of colonizing India were completely, destroyed. Now, in any other country, the Battle of Kolachal or the statues of Martanda Verma, who ensured a major European power did not colonize us, would have been installed in every street square. But today, I think beyond Kerala, even Kerala, I don't know how many know him, but beyond Kerala, I'm sure his name doesn't ring a bell in anybody's head. And the Battle of Kolachal is something that no one would know. So that's what I'm talking about, that we have always been told constantly that we are a nation of losers, while all these important milestones as stories of victory, which we need to be told to understand why we are still around and alive and kicking today as a nation. And going to the distant, eastern part of India, the northeast, as I said, the Ahoms, who ruled there for 600 years, from 1226 almost till 1850, the 1850s and 60s, 600 uninterrupted years. And this was one region which was never occupied by any invader, be it the Afghans, be it the Turks, be it the Mughals, whoever tried to invade Kamrupa. They never managed to occupy it beyond, at the most, a couple of years. And in the 17th century, when under Shah Jahan, a significant part of Western Assam was occupied by the Mughals. But later on, they managed to reoccupy it. And again, an army was sent by Aurangzeb to recapture what they had lost. Mir Jumla of the Aurangzeb's army managed to capture almost Guwahati and the whole of Western Assam. But that is where I think, the manner in which these Ahoms, under their general Lachit Borphukan, managed to regroup, strategize how for 2 to 3 years, the entire focus of everybody in that kingdom, right from the ruler down to the peasant to the common citizen, everyone was interested only in regrouping oneself, strategizing. The honor of your kingdom and your race had to be re-established. I think it makes for a classic case study in any B school on how the underdogs win, by just strategizing and being numerically very, very inferior, but still managing to use all the resources which are to your advantage against what would have been considered an invincible army. Aurangzeb was so incensed that he sent a very big army under the Raja of Jaipur, Raja Ram Singh. It was one of the largest imperial armies of India, and that attacked Assam. And it took them 2-3 years of fight, which went on. And ultimately, in 1671, you had the Battle of Saraighat, where this huge army of Raja Ram Singh and Aurangzeb were completely defeated, and the Ahoms played to their advantage of being a naval supremacy. The Brahmaputra and the rivers in Assam gave them that naval advantage, so they managed to push Ram Singh back. And after that, Aurangzeb gave up all his ideas of invading Assam again, and Assam remained an independent, thriving kingdom thereafter, as it had been in the past as well. So Lachit's story, I think, is that inspiration which sadly we've not been told about. And as I said, we're just 24th of November was Lachit Divas, which was his 400th birth anniversary. And I'm so thankful that these stories were there, as I said, on billboards right from the air to every choraha and bus stand and everywhere, where he's staring you in the face and saying, hey, you can't ignore me any longer. That is when the subaltern speaks, and you have these forgotten stories of the past actually coming out into larger narrative. Similarly, I mean, without going into much detail, I think it's I'll just briefly touch upon a few others. From Maharashtra, there are actually 3 characters that I've chosen, the largest number from any state, because it's always been the land of the brave and the warriors. So Chand Bibi of Ahmednagar, who ensured that Akbar himself had to come all the way to the Deccan to vanquish her and Ahmednagar and Bijapur, both the kingdoms that she was simultaneously managing. But ultimately she gets killed, but it's after a huge resistance that she puts up to ensure that the imperial armies do not occupy her territory. Kanhoji Angre, the Sarkhel or the supreme commander of the Maratha fleet. Now, after the Cholas, for a long time, the navy of India had been on a decline. And if there was someone who gave it a new spurt, it was, of course, Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, who was the founder of the Indian navy. But unlike the Cholas, the Marathas never went out into the open seas, to attack and capture. They were more like coast guards. And at that time, the whole of the western coast and Konkan, which was protected against the simultaneous of the Dutch, the East India Company, the French, the Portuguese, and the Siddhis, all of them operating in that region. And Shivaji, I think, understood the importance of that, built several coastal forts all over this place. And Kanhoji, who becomes the commander of the Maratha Navy, ensures that all these people, they never got an upper hand against the Maratha fleet. He managed to negotiate kartazes or trade passes or passports with the merchants of all these nationalities to ensure that the Maratha supremacy is established on the high seas of the Western Arabian Sea. So he is again a very important figure, and no wonder now that the new insignia of the Indian Navy has Chhatrapati Shivaji and the Maratha emblem on the flag that has now been redesigned. Similarly, another person somewhat from Maharashtra would be Devi Ahilyabai Holkar. I've included her, though she's not in the traditional way, a warrior who put on an armor and burst into the battlefield. But nonetheless, I would count her as a civilizational warrior, because she probably, at a time when in the heights of iconoclasm, the heights of destruction of so many of our sacred spots, she ensured that the whole country had a cultural renaissance and kind of united the nation through spirituality, through her piety, her devotion, and her sense of re-establishing the faith, so to say. So all the 12 Jyotirlingas, we talk only of Kashi and Somnath that she rebuilt, but all the 12 Jyotirlingas she renovated. The 7 Puris, according to the Garud Puran, all of them were reconstructed. The Char Dhams, they were also reconstructed from Kashmir to Rameshwaram, from Kamrupa to Dwarka, the entire country, almost like a second Shankaracharya. She probably invigorated and united the nation, north, south, east, west. And so that was one important person who I thought should be included. And she also had a fascinating story. Her father-in-law, Malhar Rao Holkar, found her a little girl while he was on his visit from one town to the other, and he was so taken in by her intelligence and so on. And he asked for her hand for his son Khande Rao. And again, interestingly, like we saw in Rudrama's case, here was a father-in-law who ensured that the daughter-in-law was given education, he used to confide in her more than his own son, whom he thought was a no-gooder, and ensured also that all matters of administration, politics, tradecraft were discussed with the daughter-in-law. And once the son dies, most of the other wives, they commit sati, but Malhar Rao prevails upon Ahilyabai not to commit sati and rule along with him. And once he dies, she takes over as the ruler of Indore, moves the capital to Maheshwar, establishes all these traders there, the Maheshwari Sadis, which we see even to this day, the weavers and the tradesmen who are established there. And her kingdom or her rule become of good governance in the few decades that she ruled Indore. And I think that is one reason she is considered a maternal figure even to this day in Indore. In every part of the city, you find her, image. But so little is known about Ahilya Bai to the larger, imagination of India, other than probably just her name, or you enter Indore and the airport is named after her. Very little is known about her life, what actually she did, and so on. So this a more modern story of an Indian woman, but then the thread being the same of right from Nike Devi to Rudramma to Abbakka to all of them. I think the thread was very similar in terms of how this lady functioned. So similarly, there are a couple of others. There's Banda Singh Bahadur from Punjab, who established the first Sikh state in India about 70, 80 years before Maharaja Ranjit Singh. He takes revenge for all the atrocities that are committed against the Sikh gurus, including his own guru, Guru Gobind Singh, and defeats the Mughals. But of course, later it's a very short-lived Sikh kingdom, and he's captured, and in the worst of atrocities and tortures are meted on him and his followers, and they are all publicly paraded and executed in on the streets of Delhi. So Banda Singh Bahadur, again, in Delhi too, there is just a flyover called Banda Singh Bahadur flyover, but people in Delhi also don't know who this man actually is. So he's another person whom I've tried to feature. And from the Manipur, there is, as I said, Rajarshi Bhagya Chandra Jai Singh of the Meitei rulers of Manipur, who kept the Burmese at check from invading Manipur. And one of his significant contributions is the introduction of Vaishnav traditions into Manipur. So today, if you see the Manipuri Ras Leela and the Nata Sankirtana that you see there, the Krishna Bhakti that is there, the Govindji temple that is there at Imphal, all of these were established during his role. And so like Ahilya Bai, for me, he was also a civilizational hero who needed to be celebrated. Then, of course, we had Velu Nachiyar from South India, from Shiv Ganga, who in the 18th century was the first Indian woman to launch a major offensive against the East India Company. And she even visited France at the peak of the French Revolution, confabulated with the French revolutionaries, and she could speak Urdu, French, English, all of that with great ease, conversed with Hyder Ali of Mysore, and formed alliances with him against the British, and also collaborated with the French to ensure that the British were rooted out of her kingdom. And finally, of course, we have Begum Hazrat Mahal. Again, when we talk of 1857, it's always, Lakshmi Bai, Rani Lakshmi Bai, and rightly so. She gets the... But Lucknow was a place which, resisted the British incursion during the uprising to the maximum. It took the longest time for the British to occupy Lucknow. And there it was Hazrat Mahal who was the symbol of, resistance. And quite interestingly, she didn't even come from a, noble family or anything. She was a daughter of an African slave. A lot of Africans were there in the Nawab of Awadh's army. And this lady was born there. She became part of Wajid Ali Shah's Pari Khana, where all these damsels were who were pretty and so on and talented. They were taken into the Pari Khana. They became singers and dancers. And Nawab Wajid Ali Shah got besotted by her, and he took her as a concubine. And later on, she, of course, gives birth to a son to him. And once anybody who gives birth to a son becomes the queen, and she gets a title of Begum and gets a mahal attached to her name. So she then, from a African slave to a concubine to a Pari in the Pari Khana to the Begum Hazrat Mahal, she had a long journey. But of course, Saas Bahu ki gadbad all the time, even in those days. So Wajid Ali Shah's mother was always against him being associated with all these low caste women. So she prevailed upon him to divorce Begum Hazrat Mahal. And so she was actually abandoned. And when Wajid Ali Shah was exiled to Calcutta, she was left behind in Lucknow. But destiny's child that she was, when the uprising happened, there was no one else of the royal family whom the rebels would choose as their symbol. And so they just said, there is a lady who is the former wife of the Nawab, and she has a son, Birjis Qadar. So let's make her the regent queen and coronate her son as the new Nawab, and they will be our leaders against the British. So for almost 1 year, Lucknow held out the siege against the British. She had a large army of women corps, women who were part of the army of resistance. There's this famous lady called Uda Devi Pasi, a Dalit woman who was part of Begum's entourage, who scripted a lot of courageous tales against the British. But ultimately, of course, she was exiled, sent away to Nepal, where she died there. She lies there in an unmarked grave in a masjid that she got built there, coincidentally, which she called Hindustan Masjid. Even after going away there, I think Hindustan was very much on her mind. And so that is how her story, of course, ended. And with that, also, the book ends with her, with 1857, as I said, because I thought this was an opportune time span or milestone to complete this entire story. But this is just the start. I mean, so many people have been asking, but why have you left X or Y or Z and so on? I'm sure there are thousands of other Bravehearts who deserve to be spoken about, whose stories deserve to come out in public. And this is just the start. And I'm sure, I hope that this book inspires several other historians and scholars to write similar accounts of long forgotten heroes and heroines, importantly, of Indian history, who have not been given their due. So thank you so much for a patient hearing, and I open to questions now.
Yeah, Vikram, thanks a lot. I've always been impressed whenever I've heard you. The last was at Beef for the Veer Savarkar. And today also, just opened our eyes. Like Mrudula wrote, she's already bought your book right now.
Oh, okay.
We are open to questions, very brief and fast, because we are running out of time. I didn't want to interrupt you in between. So,
Sanjay, can I ask a question?
Yeah, Vardhaman, you can start, then Mrudula after that.
Vikram, thank you so much. It was absolutely a pleasure listening to you as always.
Thank you.
One quick question on, I was reading Richard Eaton's book in the India in the Persianate Age. And I thought I got a feel that the Turkish invasion of Somnath 17 times was over-glorified by the narratives at that point of time, and which we continue to do so. Is it the fact? As a historian, you would know better, you would tell us.
Over-glorified by his own court chronicle?
Yeah, maybe the British narrative was to over-glorify the invasion than to talk about their own defeat at Khyber or some place of that time.
To an extent, I think that is true. But I think also what is, if the British narrative was to over-glorify, as you say, I think post-independence, the so-called leftist narrative of what happened in Somnath is to almost make it sound that it was not for theological purposes. It was not for religious purposes. It was because Somnath had a lot of wealth. And that is the only reason why Ghazni invaded it so many times. There may be just a part truth in it, because when you see their own chroniclers, when he invades Gujarat initially, the ruler of Gujarat has run away, Bhim Deva, and then he has an easy way through Patan and goes to Somnath. He's quite astonished to see 50,000 common Hindus, not even part of the royal entourage or the royal army, who are defending this temple. They are just common human people who are trying to defend their god and their deity, and it takes him 1 week to actually kill all of them and then enter the temple. And as he goes to the Garbhagriha, all the priests, they come to him and say, you are a lutera, so you want money, we will give you as much money as you want, just spare our god. And then he is supposed to have said, and these are accounted in his own contemporary chroniclers and later Persian chroniclers, Al-Baruni and Farishta and Minhaj-e-Siraj and others, who say he laughs at the priests and says, if I do that, I will be called as a trader of idols, whereas I want my legacy to be remembered as a Bujshikan or a breaker of idols. So I don't want your money, I want the idol. And so he smashes it, and then it is pounded into powder and then taken away to the steps of
Yeah,
mosques
yeah.
in Ghazni and so on. So I think that both these things are an exaggeration. The glorification, he was defeated numerous times, and Somnath, the resistance that Somnath gave by common people as well, that also is underplayed. And this fact that there was a very strong religious motive, there was a theological motive in these invasions, that also is sadly, I think, underplayed.
Thank you. Thank you. Look forward to see you at the PLF.
Yeah, thank you, Vardhaman.
Thank
Yeah, Mrudula.
Yeah, first of all, incredible work, and it is just so impressive. Thank you so much. I like 1 hour was I was totally hooked on. By the way, we have a common connection. I'm also a Bitsian.
Oh, is it? Wow, wonderful.
Yes, many years your senior though. But I just feel so compelled that this message has to go out, right? In the books, in the NCRT books or wherever, but how? So I'm sure you would have also done some effort, but what is it that we can do, and what is it that's happening to take this message across and told reality the way it is?
Yeah, I mean, it's so sad that, the governments of the day, whichever color, they just don't see this as an important thing. We've had HRD ministers who come and say, we've not changed a single line in our history textbooks, and almost make it sound like a matter of pride rather than of shame. The books continue to remain what they are. And of course, the government is the one which can scale it up. So I don't know if people who have the influence, the ears and eyes and whatever of the governments prevail upon them. And democracy is always a system of competing lobbies. So I think if one can lobby in the right sense of the term to ensure that it is very important that our children read the right story of our country. And so at the governmental level, that change has to be done through these petitions and through messages that one can do. But till the time the government wakes up, I think through forums like this, and now with social media, the manner in which information can be, I think, disseminated much more easily. So if you've ordered the book, you read the book, you like it, maybe you can just record a little snippet of somebody whom you really admired in the book, and then put it out on social media, so that way maybe it reaches a larger audience and compels more people to read all of this, till the time the sleepy governments of the country, they wake up and smell the coffee.
Absolutely. Yeah. But thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we'll go on to the formal vote of thanks, Meeta. Could you, and then Vardhamanji, I hope you're ready with your 4-liners.
Surely.
Yeah, Smita, over to you.
Yeah.
I think Neeru had
I'd like to thank Dr. Sampat for his simply amazing talk. It was a lot of very interesting insights came up. As he pointed out at the very outset, the history of India as taught in the schools focuses on India's losses. It was probably written at that time there's a theory, it was written at that time to create perfectly obedient slaves who have a low self-image. And it's very heartening to see that a lot of writers, even without the government support, are coming up today. And a lot of research is being done into India's victories. It's like they talk of losses in 2 battles and nothing is written about the 100 years in between, where there were several victories and where invaders were pushed back. So, and this Dr. Sampat's research in this book sounds completely fascinating. I'm sure everybody here just cannot wait to read it. So thank you so much for giving us your time and sharing insights into your book.
Sanjay,
Yeah.
those of who want to meet Dr. Sampat, tomorrow we are having a session at Varji. I am sending you the invite to the group.
Yeah, please do that. Huh?
Yeah.
Vardhamanji. Vardhamanji
Yes.
is a person who writes immediately on the spot 4 lines. So
I see. Oh, nice.
Vikram, this is in Hindi, out of tune with what has happened all thus far. Hindi mein do dohe hai, but I'm sure you would love them. And here it goes. निर्मम युग ने ये कहा, ये है मेरी सीख. निर्मम युग ने ये कहा, ये है मेरी सीख. शेर को भी मिलती नहीं, मांगे से भी भीख. You talked of the lion's story. So this is the first 4 lines and the next ones are to you. So I read out again. निर्मम युग ने ये कहा, ये है मेरी सीख. शेर को भी मिलती नहीं, मांगे से भी भीख. विक्रम जब हमको मिला, डाले रोशनी दिन बीत. रत्न उपेक्षित ढूंढ निकाले, रत्न उपेक्षित ढूंढ निकाले, गर्वित हो अपना अतीत.
वाह वाह वाह.
गर्वित हो अपना अतीत. Vikram, thank you so much.
क्या बात.
Wow,
you so
wow.
much.
Sanjay, even I want to say 2 lines for
Yeah, अरे वाह, नीरू जी, yes,
I
please,
have
please.
just written it. वर्धमान जी से थोड़ा सा प्रेरित होकर, कैसे
बात है?
तुम बता पाते हो अलग सा जो दुनिया को कम पता है, कैसे तुम बता पाते हो अलग सा जो दुनिया को कम पता है, कैसी है एक अलग एक आग वो जानने की जो इतिहास में छिपा है. तुम्हारा दृष्टिकोण बहुत भाता है हमको, क्योंकि तुम्हारा दृष्टिकोण बहुत भाता है हमको, क्योंकि हमारे स्वर्णिम समय को बता पाने की तुम में अद्भुत क्षमता है. जारी रखना ढूंढना यूं ही, जारी रखना ढूंढना यूं ही, हमारे बीते कल का वो सोना जो धूल में ढका ढका सा पड़ा है. Thank you. It was very
क्या बात है,
nice.
नीरू जी?
I'm so honored and touched.
Wonderful,
Both of
wonderful.
you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Okay, Vikram, right, thanks a lot. I think we are running out of time now. Meeting is urgent. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you, Vikram.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank
Thanks.
you.